What is the history of House Karstark? What is their connection to House Stark? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we cover A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings and other great fantasy books and TV shows like The Witcher. Welcome. This video is another collaboration with the wonderful History of Westeros. Please do check out their YouTube channel and podcast. There's a link in the description. Roughly 1,000 years before the start of A Song of Ice and Fire, there was a rebellion against House Stark. A younger son of Winterfell was given command and distinguished himself by defeating the rebels with conspicuous bravery. His name was Karlon Stark, and for those deeds his father granted him a tract of land and the right to raise a castle. The castle was at first nicknamed Karl's Hold, and its lords the Karl's Hold Starks, to distinguish them from the Starks of Winterfell. Over the years, the name of the castle became Carhold, and its lords the Karstarks. Their sigil is a white sun on black, and their house words describe it. They are the Sun of Winter. We can see it then as a symbol of light shining against the darkness, of warmth to defy the cold, of hope, perhaps. Carhold lies just west of the Grey Cliffs, beside an unnamed forested river, not too far from the coast of the Narrow Sea. However, the presence of the Grey Cliffs imply that safe harbours are scarce or non-existent. Perhaps it is possible to sail up the unnamed river, we don't know. In any event, the cliffs must present some defence against the potential raiders from the sea, from Skagos perhaps, or maybe even the Free Folk. A Stark giving lands to another Stark is a rarity, as it is with other ruling houses in many other kingdoms, mostly because it gives power and legitimacy to someone else who may, or their descendants may, challenge the ruling house at some point. Given how rare this is, Karlon must have been a particularly noteworthy and loyal figure, but the Starks probably had another reason too. In recent centuries, there's little doubt that House Bolton has emerged as the house most willing to challenge Winterfell for supremacy of the North. We know of several rebellions. In fact, the unnamed rebel lord put down by Karlon Stark may even have been a Bolton. But even if not, the placement of the new castle at Carhold is suggestive of an attempt to check the power of the Dreadfort, especially if taken in concert with the arrival of the Manderleys in White Harbour, which happened at some point around then. Sources disagree on exactly when. The lands granted to Carhold form a new border with the Dreadfort's lands, and a house loyal to Winterfell on their far side. If they tried to attack Winterfell again to the west, their own castle would be under threat from the east. After the building of Carhold, there's even something of a triangle, with White Harbour and Winterfell making up the other corners. The Dreadfort lies in the middle, surrounded by Winterfell's staunchest allies. For eons, there had been neither White Harbour nor Carhold. The Boltons would have held sway over a much larger area. This cut them down to size. So the idea behind the creation of a new house, which became known as House Karstark, may have been at least partly to keep the Boltons surrounded, strongly discouraging further rebellions or expansion. If so, it seems to have mostly worked. The Dreadfort did rise against the Starks at least one more time, but not since then, which partly explains why Roose Bolton's turn was so unexpected. The Dreadfort hadn't rebelled in many centuries, apparently not since before the Conquest. It's surely no coincidence that Roose Bolton's treachery came with the support of some members of House Karstark. He knew who he needed as allies. House Stark has married into most of the other powerful northern houses over the years, and House Karstark is no exception. There are 3 examples we know of, and probably many more we don't. The first comes in the time of Viserys I. Margaret Karstark, wife of Bernard Stark, who was uncle of the famous Cregan Stark, he of the Hour of the Wolf fame in the Dance of the Dragons. Cregan's father died before he had come of age, so Bernard became regent of Winterfell, but he didn't give up power when Cregan did come of age. Cregan did eventually reclaim his seat, but there was a time when Margaret Karstark was Lady of Winterfell. Many decades later, perhaps more than half a century, Cregan married his youngest son Brandon to Alice Karstark. Despite his low position in the line of succession, Brandon eventually became Lord, after all. In fact, all current Starks descend from this particular Brandon Stark and Alice Karstark. More recently, Lysara Karstark married the wonderfully named Artos the Implacable Stark. He was such a famed warrior that there's a statue of him in the Winterfell crypts, despite him never actually being Lord of Winterfell, an oft-overlooked precedent to Ned's insistence on there being statues made of Lyanna and Brandon. Anyway, it seems likely that one of Artos and Lysara's descendants a couple of generations later was Lynara Stark, who was Rickard Stark's first cousin and wife. Lynara and Rickard, of course, were the parents of Brandon, Ned, Lyanna and Benjen. So the Starks we know in the main story have quite a bit of Karstark ancestry. A thing that the Karstarks are proud of. They aren't just another northern house. They are close kin to the Starks and have been since the founding of their house. In fact, the Lord of Carhold at the start of the series is even named after Rickard Stark. He fought alongside Ned during Robert's rebellion, after his namesake was burned alive by Mad King Aerys II, including at the decisive and bloody Battle of the Trident. We first see Lord Rickard Karstark and his 3 sons with their army in A Song of Ice and Fire via Bran, who watches them from afar as they arrive to join Robb's host. He thinks that they don't look like Starks, a line that clearly carries an extra layer of meaning given what comes later. Lord Rickard and his 2 younger sons fought in the Battle of the Whispering Wood, while his heir Harrion led the Karstark men under Roose Bolton at the Battle of the Green Fork. During Tyrion's POV chapter that takes place during that battle, he notices the Karstark sigil in large numbers. The Karstarks, however, lost more than most in both those battles. Harrion Karstark survived the Battle of the Green Fork, but was captured by the Lannisters and taken to Harrenhal. His 2 brothers in the Whispering Wood were killed by Jaime Lannister when he made his mad charge at Robb Stark. Jaime also slew the heir to House Hornwood, Darin, in that charge. Darin had been betrothed to Lord Rickard's only daughter, Alice. So Rickard lost 2 of his 3 sons, with the other captured, and his only daughter's fiancé. He gets increasingly angry from then, demanding vengeance for his sons and opposing any peace deal, and you can understand why. When the Great John Umber declared that the North should secede with Robb as their king, Lord Rickard is the first to agree, laying his sword beside Lord Umber's at Robb's feet. And Lord Rickard accompanied Robb on his foray into the Westerlands. At the Battle of Oxcross, it was he who slew the enemy commander Sir Stafford Lannister, and then he who led raids across the west coast. But then he found another outlet for his anger. Catelyn Stark freed Jaime, the man who had killed Rickard's sons and would-be son-in-law, and Robb was lenient with her. Lord Rickard could take no more. He ordered his cavalry to hunt down the Kingslayer and offered his daughter Alice's hand in marriage to whoever caught him. Lord Rickard and a small squad also murdered the captive squires Willem Lannister and Tion Frey, plus 2 Riverrun men guarding their cell, which proved one thing too many for Robb. After that crime, Rickard ceased to be in a position to give much of anything to anyone, and the offer of his daughter's hand vanished as quickly as it appeared. Immediately taken into custody, Lord Rickard remained defiant. He pointed out the hypocrisy of Robb's leniency in the case of Jaime's freedom and mocked him for losing the North. Robb would hear no appeal, not for the sake of keeping their army intact, not for the sake of their ancient kinship. Rickard pointed out that he had been named after Robb's grandfather, that he had fought against King Aerys and King Joffrey both, but Robb was resolved, having stated, "He killed my honour." The sentence was death. Following the northern custom, the king wielded the executioner's axe himself, for which Lord Rickard offered thanks, but for naught else, he added. Rickard's final words were, "Kill me and be cursed, you are no king of mine." The Karstark infantry deserted the next day, joining the Karstark horsemen who Rickard had sent off immediately after learning of Jaime's release. These leaderless men caused great harm to innocents in the Riverlands in their zeal to capture Jaime Lannister, and eventually many of them became broken men. Some of them appeared at Acorn Hall while Arya was there, but Lady Smallwood ordered her crossbowmen to take a few shots and the Karstark raiders departed. Meanwhile, Harrion Karstark, the heir, remained a captive of the Lannisters in Duskendale. There was a bit of toing and froing while Roose Bolton prepared to switch sides, but the net result was that the Karstark soldiers were lost and Harrion still a prisoner. And intriguingly, no one is really sure where his loyalties lie, and we have no idea what his personality is like at all. While Robb lived, he was sure Harrion would be his enemy because he executed Harrion's father, but Robb is now gone, and Harrion surely will have no love for the Lannisters who imprisoned him, or Roose Bolton who betrayed him, or indeed his great-uncle Arnulf, who we'll get onto in a moment. Harrion has survived quite a lot. Roose Bolton, Randall Tarley, Gregor Clegane twice, Vargo Hoat, and his own family. He was either marked for death by or in the clutches of all those men, yet made it through. Perhaps this implies George R. R. Martin has plans for him. And perhaps Well, it's probably worth noting that although I've been saying Harrion is a Lannister prisoner, he is physically being held in Maidenpool by Randyll Tarly, who may turn out to be one of the Golden Company's friends in the Reach, so perhaps he has other plans for the powerful Northern Lord he has in his control. I did a whole other video about the friends in the Reach if you're interested, but the main point here is that although Harrion has been in the background of the story so far, he is definitely still one to keep an eye on. Anyway, while he is being held captive, the world is plotting around him. Had Harrion been killed, Roose Bolton could have married Alice Karstark, who would then have been the heir, to a Northerner of his choosing, effectively giving Carhold to a new lord. At the moment, Carhold is being held by Arnulf Karstark as Castellan. He is uncle to old Lord Rickard and therefore great-uncle to the captive Lord Harrion, and he appears to be ambitious. He openly declared his support for King Stannis, unlike most other northern houses, hoping that the Lannister response would be to execute Harrion. He planned to then marry his son, Cregan, to Alice, who they could then rule through and eventually claim through their children. That plan, however cunning, was not cunning enough, however. Harrion was not executed. Not to be deterred, Arnulf also seemed to be plotting to turn on Stannis at an opportune moment in battle, thereby ensuring a Bolton victory and presumably ensuring Bolton support for him claiming Carhold. But as we saw in the sample The Winds of Winter Theon chapter, that plan also failed. In fact, it backfired horribly. Arnulf and all his grandsons and sons, minus Cregan, were captured. 2 were even killed in the process. Stannis told them they'd be executed, though we haven't seen that happen yet. At which point, let's switch our attention to Alice Karstark, who is much more deserving of our sympathy. Getting wind of all of this plotting and growing fearful that her uncle Cregan, or technically he's her first cousin once removed, I think, who Arnulf wanted her to marry, would just kill her after she had produced an heir, escaped, running north to seek sanctuary at the wall. Cregan went after her, literally hunting her with a pack of dogs, some men-at-arms and some crossbows. Alice made it. Jon arranged a swift marriage for her to Sigorn, the Magnar of Then, and threw Cregan into the ice cells, where he is going swiftly unhinged, throwing frozen feces at guards bringing him food and howling in the night. Jon sent Sigorn and Alice back to Carhold for what will surely be a mixed reaction. The idea of marrying a northern noblewoman to a wildling is not universally popular, to say the least, and Arnulf and Cregan probably still have some loyalists there. All of which leaves House Karstark in a very uncertain and hugely damaged position at the start of the Winds of Winter. Their lord is a political prisoner in the south. The Castellan of Carhold is under sentence of death by Stannis, and his son an increasingly unstable prisoner of Jon, while a wildling is travelling to Carhold to claim it for himself and his new wife. Most of the house's soldiers have died in the south, and winter is coming. Will Randyll Tarly try to use Harrion to support young Griff's claim? Will Stannis go through with his plan to execute Arnulf, or might he escape in the confusion of the battle about to take place? Will Cregan remain a prisoner at Castle Black now Jon has been killed? Will Sigorn be able to claim Carhold without a fight? There are a lot of moving pieces in this storyline. And this does take away from where we started this video. The Karstarks started out as Stark loyalists. Their sigil is a sign of hope in the darkness. Can that hope be rekindled? Well, there are some small signs of hope, mostly through Alice. Melisandre told Jon of a vision she had of a girl in grey on a dying horse, which she believed to be Arya, but it turned out to be Alice Karstark, who Jon remembered from their youth. They had met before, probably when old Rickard Stark had hoped to marry her to Robb, a not unreasonable match given the history of their 2 houses. Now, Alice reminds Jon of Arya. So while Melisandre did not see Arya in her vision, she did see someone with a lot in common with her. Perhaps a subtle reminder of the connection between the Starks and Karstarks at a time when their relationship is as bad as it's ever been. And more importantly, Alice made it clear that there were no hard feelings between herself and Jon over her father's execution. She admitted that her father Rickard was fearsome in his wrath, and she was not entirely surprised that rage and grief drove him to treason. At her lowest ebb, she sought sanctuary with the neutrality of the Night's Watch, and Jon, the supposed bastard son of Ned Stark. The Karstarks considered themselves kin to the Starks, one family with 2 names. Perhaps through Alice, we see an echo of how Harrion will feel about the Starks. Perhaps that strongest of Stark allies will come good again, even as the others and their endless winter will bear down on Carhold and the North. Perhaps the son of Winter will find a way to keep shining in the darkness. We can but hope. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the link on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.